She lived as human for a decade, until the Alpha King marked her as his. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to Elara Wynn. The night the truth began to stir inside her started like any other in the quiet border village of Ashridge. The air held the crisp bite of early autumn, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke drifting through narrow dirt paths and weathered wooden houses. Elara walked home from the small tavern where she worked evenings, her steps soft on the gravel, her fingers clutching the frayed straps of her canvas bag. She had lived here for 10 years, just long enough for everyone to forget she'd ever arrived, but not long enough for her to forget she didn't truly belong. Villagers greeted her with polite distance, the kind offered to a stray dog that never learned how to bark properly. They couldn't name it, but they sensed something off about her. The way her heart raced uncontrollably when the moon rose too full. The way she flinched when she smelled raw metal. The way animals stared at her a second longer than they should, as if recognizing a language she didn't know she still spoke. That night, the wind shifted, and the forest to the north answered with a deep, distant rumble. Elara froze. The sound hit her chest like pressure from the inside. A pull, ancient, cold, magnetic. Her breath stuttered. Her pulse kicked painfully beneath her skin. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself she was human. She had lived as one for a decade. Humans didn't tremble when a distant howl rolled across the treetops. Humans didn't feel heat flare at the base of their throat like something trapped beneath their skin was clawing its way up. She took another step, but her knees weakened. A prickling shot up her arms, tiny sparks flickering under her skin like faint golden threads. Not again, she whispered, pressing her palm to her neck where a faint mark, one she always covered with a scarf, burned hotter than usual. She never showed it. She barely touched it. But tonight, it pulsed in a slow, awakening rhythm. Footsteps crunched behind her. She startled, spinning around, expecting one of the villagers, but the road was empty. Still, the hairs on her arms lifted. Something, was watching from the tree line. The same rumble echoed again, closer now, vibrating through the ground. The forest seemed to breathe with it, exhaling cold air that brushed her cheeks and sent a shiver down her spine. Elara's vision blurred for a second, the world narrowing to a single instinct she didn't have words for, run or answer. But humans didn't answer calls like this. And she was human. She had to be. She forced her legs to move, quickening her pace toward the small cabin she rented at the village edge, but the moment she reached her porch, another sound drifted through the dark, the soft, fragile whine of something in pain. It came from the forest behind her cabin. Her fear tangled instantly with something else. Compassion, a pull towards suffering she could never ignore. She set her bag down silently and followed the sound into the trees, pushing aside branches as moonlight pooled in silver patches on the ground. Then she saw it. A large black wolf lying half-collapsed against a fallen pine trunk. Its fur was matted with blood, muscles trembling, breath ragged in the cold night air. Elara's heart clenched. Ordinary wolves avoided human settlements. This one looked nothing like ordinary. Its eyes were a sharp, burning silver, so intense that when they slid toward her, she forgot how to breathe. She should have run. But something ancient stirred inside her, a forgotten instinct rising through 10 years of dust. She knelt slowly, her hands shaking as she whispered, "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The wolf growled weakly, but didn't move. Elara reached out, and the moment her fingertips brushed its fur, warmth shot through her veins, a pulse of energy she'd never felt before. The mark on her neck flared, glowing faintly beneath her scarf. The wolf's eyes widened, not in fear, but in recognition. As if he knew her, as if he had been searching for her. Elara gasped, pulling her hand back, but the wolf nudged forward, struggling upright for a second before collapsing again. A strange pressure filled the air, heavy enough to make her sway. She had no idea she wasn't tending to an ordinary wounded creature. She had no idea the Alpha King of Thornvale, Kael Arden himself, lay bleeding at her feet, watching the Omega who had vanished from his world 10 years ago without a trace. She only knew one thing. Something inside her had begun to wake, something that had slept for a long, long time, and now refused to be silent. Trees swayed overhead as Elara knelt beside the wounded black wolf, her breath trembling in the cold night air. She should have been afraid. Any sensible human girl would have been. But the longer she stayed there, the more something inside her steadied, as if an invisible thread tugged her closer to him. His silver eyes locked onto hers, reflecting the moonlight like polished metal. They were fierce, ancient, and impossibly intelligent. Elara did not know why her heartbeat slowed instead of spiking, why her palms warmed instead of freezing. She only knew she could not leave him like this. The wolf tried to rise again, muscles bunching under his matted fur, but pain forced him back to the ground with a low, guttural sound that vibrated through her bones. Elara swallowed, feeling that strange heat spreading from the hidden mark on her neck down her spine. "You are hurt," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, let me help." She reached for him again, slower this time, showing her empty palms the way one would approach a frightened animal. The wolf's ears flicked forward. His breathing grew rough, uneven. Then, to her shock, he lowered his head in a small, deliberate nod. Elara's breath hitched. Wolves did not nod. Not like that. She pushed the thought aside and examined the wound near his ribs. A jagged piece of metal protruded from the torn flesh, smeared with blackened blood. The metallic scent made her stomach twist, yet her fingers moved with a confidence that did not feel like her own. When she touched the wound, warmth surged through her hand in a soft pulse. It was the same energy she felt earlier, the same one that made her question if she was truly human at all. The wolf inhaled sharply. His eyes flashed brighter, almost knowing. Elara flinched back, but his paw shifted toward her, pressing lightly against her knee as if urging her to continue. She wrapped both hands around the shard of metal, bracing herself, and pulled. The wolf growled low, but he did not strike. The shard came free with a wet sound that made her shiver. Blood welled up, dark and too thick to be normal. She pressed her hands against the wound, thinking only of stopping the bleeding. But something else happened. Light. Faint, soft, golden light seeped through her fingers like sunlight passing through thin fabric. Elara gasped and jerked back, staring at her hands. They glowed for barely a second, but it was enough. The wolf's breathing steadied. His muscles relaxed. The bleeding slowed. "What was that?" she whispered. "What am I?" The wolf's eyes widened in a way that made her chest tighten. Recognition. As if he understood her question. As if he had been waiting for this moment. A sudden rustle snapped through the trees behind her. Twigs cracked. Footsteps. Multiple. Heavy. Wolves or men. She could not tell, but they were close. Too close. The wolf's gaze hardened. He growled a warning, low and dangerous, pushing himself up onto trembling legs. Elara's panic spiked. "No," she whispered, placing both hands on his shoulders to keep him from falling. "You cannot fight like this." But the footsteps grew louder. Voices broke through the brush, sharp and urgent. "Tracks end here. The king's scent is strong. Spread out. He has to be close." Elara froze. The word king echoed in her skull like a struck bell. She looked at the wolf. Really looked. The eyes. The posture. The impossible intelligence. And the raw, commanding presence even while wounded. Her breath caught. "You are not just a wolf," she whispered. His silver eyes met hers. No denial. No fear. Just a truth she was not ready to hold. The voices drew nearer, crashing through undergrowth. The wolf made a weak attempt to stand in front of her, shielding her with his massive frame. Elara felt her throat tighten. This creature, powerful beyond anything she had ever seen, was willing to protect her even while half dying. She gently grabbed his fur, urging him toward the deeper forest. "We need to hide. Please, let me help you." For a moment, the forest held its breath. Then the wolf leaned into her touch. Chose her. Trusted her. Elara guided him into the shadows just as armored soldiers burst into the clearing, weapons gleaming under the moonlight. She held her breath, her body pressed against the warm side of the wolf, the heat of him seeping into her bones. She did not know why she cared. She did not know why she felt tethered to him, as if she had known him long before this night. But she did know one thing. Whatever he was, whatever she was becoming, their fates had just collided, and nothing would ever be the same again. Elara held her breath as the soldiers' voices thundered through the trees, their boots crushing branches and dried leaves beneath them. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, her fingers buried in the thick fur of the wounded black wolf beside her. He stayed still, every muscle tight with controlled agony, yet he angled his massive body between her and the clearing as if shielding her was more important than his own survival. Moonlight flickered through the pine branches, illuminating the clearing where the soldiers had stopped, their armor gleaming with the royal insignia of Thornvale. Elara felt the wolf's body tense at the sight of them, a low vibration humming through his chest like a warning barely held back. The lead soldier knelt, running his fingers across the disturbed dirt. "The king bled here," he said, his voice tight. "The trail is fresh. He cannot be far." Elara's breath hitched. "King." The word repeated again in her mind. Her gaze slid to the wolf's silver eyes. Powerful, intelligent, haunted. No ordinary wolf carried eyes like forged moonlight, eyes that commanded even while clouded with pain. But this was something she could not afford to think about now. The soldiers spread out, combing the bushes, sniffing the air like trained trackers. One of them stopped suddenly and turned in her direction. Elara felt the wolf shift, preparing to lunge even though his legs trembled beneath him. Panic surged inside her. He was too wounded to fight. She did the only thing she could think of. She stepped out of the shadows. The soldier spun, sword raised. "Stop." Her voice cracked, raw with fear. "Please, do not come any closer." The soldier looked startled, lowering his blade slightly when he recognized her as a villager. "You should not be out here. It is dangerous. There are threats in these woods tonight." Elara forced her shaking hands to clasp together. "I heard noises. I came to look. But there is nothing here. Please, you are frightening the wildlife." The soldier frowned, clearly unconvinced. He sniffed the air again. Elara's heart pounded violently. Her scent was human, she reminded herself. 10 years of living this life had sealed that part well enough. The soldier finally shook his head. "Return to the village at once. If you see anything unusual, report it immediately." "I will," she whispered. He gestured to his men. "Move out. The king must be found before the moon shifts." The group disappeared into the forest, the sound of their pursuit fading until only the whisper of leaves remained. Elara waited several long seconds before dashing back into the shadows where the wolf lay collapsed on his side. His breath was ragged, but his eyes were sharp with silent fury. "You could have been killed," she scolded, her voice trembling as she knelt beside him again. "Why would you try to protect me like that? You cannot even stand." The wolf huffed softly, as if the answer was obvious. She reached for him, and the moment her hand touched his fur, a jolt shot through her palm, racing up her arm, wrapping around her heart. She sucked in a breath, staring at her trembling fingers. It felt like a memory trying to break free from a locked room in her mind. She looked back at the wolf. "You know me," she whispered. The silver in his eyes flared with a truth she could not yet decipher. He pushed his snout gently against her wrist, urging her toward the deeper forest. At first she did not understand. Then she realized what he wanted. He needed a place to hide, a place the soldiers would not search. Elara hesitated. If anyone found out she helped him, she would be arrested. Or worse. Yet something inside her insisted she could not walk away from him. She slipped an arm under his chest. "I will try," she whispered. The wolf forced himself upright, leaning heavily against her as she guided him through the winding trees, deeper into the forest, toward an old abandoned hunter's shelter she had discovered years ago. Every few steps he stumbled, but he refused to stop. His warmth radiated through her clothes, grounding her even as fear clawed at her throat. When they finally reached the shelter, Elara eased him inside, her palms warm and tingling from the effort. The wolf collapsed onto the wooden floor. He looked up at her, silver eyes softening for the first time since she found him. "I will keep you safe," she whispered, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "Just rest. I will figure out what to do next." The mark on her neck pulsed again, slow and steady, like a heartbeat syncing with his. And somewhere deep inside her, a memory stirred, whispering a truth she was not ready to face. She had not found him tonight. He had found her. Icy air seeped through the gaps in the old hunter's shelter as Elara knelt beside the black wolf, her breath unsteady while she listened for any sign of the soldiers returning. The forest outside had grown eerily silent, as if every living thing sensed the presence of something far more powerful than a wounded predator hidden within a forgotten wooden shack. The wolf lay stretched across the dusty floorboards, his breaths slow but strained. His fur was damp with sweat and blood, yet the silver fire in his eyes had not dimmed. If anything, it burned sharper now, following her every movement as though memorizing her face. Elara brushed her fingertips lightly across his side, checking the wound she had helped close. The bleeding had slowed, almost miraculously, and she still did not know how her hands had done it. Every time she touched him, that strange warmth surged through her like a buried instinct clawing to the surface. She swallowed hard. "You should rest," she whispered. "If they find you like this, I do not know what they will do, or what they would do to her." A soft growl rolled from his chest, not at her, but toward the memory of the soldiers only moments behind them. He shifted suddenly, his body shaking from the effort, and attempted once more to rise. Elara pressed both hands gently against his shoulder. "Stop. You will tear the wound open again. Please." The wolf froze beneath her touch, not because she held him back physically, but because of something else. The moment her palms pressed to his fur, that same golden glow flickered briefly beneath her skin. The wolf inhaled sharply, as if her touch electrified him. Elara jerked her hands back, gasping. "Why does that keep happening?" The wolf pushed his snout toward her wrist, nudging it insistently, as if urging her to keep going. She hesitated. She was no healer. She was no wolf shifter. She was a human woman who lived her life sweeping tavern floors and avoiding attention. But when she placed her hands on him again, warmth spread through her palms in soft pulses. The wolf's breathing steadied. His muscles relaxed. His silver eyes drifted half-closed, not in weakness, but in surrender to something he recognized, and she did not. Elara felt her throat tighten. "You act like you know me," she whispered. The wolf opened his eyes again, those piercing silver irises locking onto hers with a look that was nothing short of absolute certainty. The intensity of it made her heart hammer painfully. She stood abruptly and moved toward the small crate in the corner of the shelter where an old blanket lay folded. When she reached for it, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. Her vision blurred, the world tilting slightly. She gripped the crate until the spinning slowed. It happened again, the same strange burning at the base of her neck, right beneath the small hidden mark she had always kept covered. She pressed her fingers to it, wincing. The heat pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, as if something inside the mark was responding to the wolf's presence. "This is not normal," she whispered. "I am not normal." Behind her, the wolf emitted a low sound, not a growl but something softer, almost coaxing. Elara wrapped the blanket around her shoulders before returning to him. She sank to her knees, watching him carefully. The soft rise and fall of his chest had steadied, but the raw strength he radiated remained. Whoever he was not an ordinary shifter, and she was beginning to believe she had never been an ordinary human. A sharp crack echoed outside. Elara's breath caught. She crawled toward the door, peering through the slanted wooden boards. Torches flickered in the darkness, weaving through the trees like restless fireflies. Soldiers. Again. They were searching methodically, closing in on the shelter. Elara's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She turned back to the wolf. "They are coming," she whispered urgently. "I have to hide you." The wolf forced himself up, swaying dangerously. Elara scrambled to his side, bracing his weight with her shoulder. His warmth bled through her clothes as she guided him behind a stack of crates, the only spot in the shelter large enough to conceal him. The soldiers' voices grew louder. "Check every structure. He has to be close. The king cannot have vanished." The king. Her pulse quickened. She stared at the wolf again, her voice barely audible. "Are you truly him?" The wolf held her gaze. And in that suspended moment, the truth was so clear she could feel it in her bones. Before she could react, the shelter door rattled. A soldier shoved it open. Elara's breath caught as torchlight spilled inside. She forced her body to stand still, blocking the view to where the wolf hid, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their trembling. "Miss," the soldier said sharply, "have you seen anything unusual tonight?" Elara met his gaze, forcing the lie from her lips with a steady voice she did not recognize as her own. "No," she said, "nothing at all." And behind her, in the shadows, The Alpha King watched her with the quiet intensity of a predator recognizing the one soul in the world who could betray him or save him. Elara stood frozen as the soldiers' torchlight swept across the cramped shelter, every heartbeat pounding against her ribs like a warning drum. The air was thick with smoke and pine, stinging her eyes as she forced her expression to remain calm. Behind her, hidden in the narrow space between stacked crates and the wall, the wounded black wolf lay motionless. She could feel his presence like a pulse against her spine, powerful and unmistakably alive. The soldier's boots scraped against the wooden floor as he stepped further inside, his gaze narrowing. "You were out in the forest alone?" he asked, his suspicion sharp enough to cut through the air. Elara nodded, hoping he could not hear the tremor in her breath. "I sometimes walk at night when I cannot sleep," she replied. "There is nothing out there but wind and shadows." The soldier's eyes flicked past her shoulder. For one terrifying moment, Elara thought he had seen the glint of silver fur hidden behind her. But then he turned to inspect the opposite wall. She exhaled silently, though her hands were still clasped tightly behind her back to hide the trembling. "If you hear anything unusual," the soldier said at last, "you must inform the Royal Guard. The king's condition is critical. We cannot afford delay." Elara swallowed. "I understand." The soldier hesitated another moment, as if sensing something deeper in the room, but finally stepped outside. His voice bounced through the trees as he called to the others. "Nothing here. Move on." Elara waited until the last torchlight faded into the forest. Only then did she turn and rush to the crates. The wolf lay slumped against them, breath shallow, eyes squeezed shut as if fighting off unconsciousness. "It is all right," she whispered, dropping to her knees beside him. "They are gone. You are safe." The wolf's eyelids fluttered, revealing that piercing silver stare again. He looked at her with a painful mixture she could not name, relief, frustration, and something else that made heat coil low in her stomach. She brushed her fingers across his muzzle, and the touch sparked through her like flint striking stone. The mark on her neck throbbed once, hard enough to make her wince. The wolf's gaze snapped to the spot where her scarf hid the faint crescent symbol. A sound rumbled deep in his chest, not a growl, but something startlingly close to recognition. Elara pulled her scarf tighter instinctively. "Do not look at that," she whispered. "I do not even know what it means." But he did. She could see it in the way his eyes darkened. She rose to her feet and crossed the shelter to fetch the old clay jug of water stored beneath a cracked shelf. Her hands shook as she poured some into a shallow bowl and carried it back to him. "Drink," she said softly. He did not move. Instead, he nudged her hand with his snout again, urging her closer. She frowned, lowering the bowl. "What is it? What do you want from me?" His gaze swept over her face, down to her hands, then to the mark beneath her scarf. A jolt ran through her as she realized he wanted her touch, not the water. "You cannot possibly," she began, but the faint golden warmth was already building in her palms again, answering him even before she consciously agreed. She placed both hands against his side. The warmth surged, flooding her arms, her chest, her throat. The wolf shuddered, muscles relaxing as the pain eased. His breathing deepened, steady and sure. Elara gasped softly. She felt it too. The way their energies aligned for that brief moment, as if some invisible thread tied their souls together. When the glow faded, she sagged back, dizzy with exhaustion. The wolf lifted his head a fraction and touched his muzzle to her knee in a gesture so deliberate it stole her breath. It was gratitude. No wild creature offered that. Not unless. She shook her head quickly, refusing the thought. "I should not be able to do any of this," she whispered. "I am not a healer. I am not anything." The wolf let out a quiet, frustrated huff, as if telling her she was wrong. Suddenly, the forest outside erupted with howls, fierce and urgent, echoing through the trees like a storm breaking open. Not soldiers. Wolves. Many of them. The wolf's head snapped toward the sound, ears raised, body rigid. Elara's heart pounded. "Are they looking for you?" she whispered. His silver eyes locked onto hers, fierce with warning. The howls grew louder, closing in fast. Elara's breath hitched as realization washed over her. These were not ordinary wolves. These were Royal Guard wolves. They were coming for their king, and she was the only thing standing between them and the fallen Alpha King of Thornvale. The howls surged through the forest with a force that made the wooden walls of the shelter tremble, each echo rolling like thunder across the trees. Elara felt the sound strike her chest, deep and primal, awakening a familiar ache beneath her skin. She pressed a hand to the mark hidden under her scarf, the heat pulsing there in frantic rhythm, as if the very presence of the hunting wolves agitated something ancient inside her. The black wolf beside her rose shakily onto his paws, his breath sharp and uneven, but his posture transformed. He no longer looked like a wounded creature struggling to survive. Even injured, he radiated command, his ears forward, eyes burning like molten silver as he listened to the patterns in the howls. Elara could not understand the sounds, but he clearly did. His body stiffened with recognition and warning. "They are searching for you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant cries. "How many are there?" He turned his head toward her, and in the flicker of torchlight seeping through the wooden slats, she saw unmistakable truth in his gaze. Not just wolves, not just soldiers. His pack, his elite guard. She staggered back a step. "If they find you like this, they will take you away," she breathed. "And they will punish me. They will think I harmed you or hid you on purpose." The wolf let out a low growl, not at her, but at the imagined threat of anyone touching her. He shifted forward despite the strain in his muscles, positioning himself between her and the door once more. Even half-broken, he shielded her with a ferocity that stirred something warm and terrifying in her chest. But the voices were close now. Too close. The howls had shifted into the low rumble of wolves in human form, their footsteps crunching over frozen dirt and fallen pine needles. Elara heard a command barked sharply through the night, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal weapons being drawn. "Search every shelter. The king is injured. He must be recovered before the moon rises another inch. Move quickly." The king. Her breath caught. The wolf's silver eyes never left hers, and in that moment, she understood fully for the first time. Not guessed, not suspected. Understood. He was not just a powerful shifter. He was the Alpha King of Thornvale, the ruler whose strength was said to be unmatched, the leader whose presence could command an entire territory with a single shift, the one who had been feared, revered, and hunted tonight. And she was the one hiding him. Her knees weakened as the truth settled into her bones. "Why?" she whispered, voice barely holding together. "Why would the Alpha King protect someone like me?" The wolf did not look away. He nudged her wrist again, the same gesture he had repeated over and over. But this time there was something deeper in it. A plea, a bond, a recognition she could not decipher. Before she could respond, the shelter's outer wall shuddered under a heavy impact. Elara gasped. The wolves had found them. Light poured through the gaps as several torches closed in. Shadows moved quickly, surrounding the small structure. The wolf snarled, forcing himself upright, but Elara rushed to his side. "No," she whispered urgently. "You are too weak. Please do not fight. You will die." The wolf's eyes flashed with stubborn refusal, but she pressed both palms to his fur again, grounding him, pleading without words. Her heart hammered wildly as boots. "Approach the door." A rough voice shouted, "He is inside. I can smell his blood." Elara flinched, instinct screaming for her to run, but she stood her ground. The wolf leaned against her leg, and despite his condition, a surge of power radiated from him, raw and electric, brushing against her skin like the heat of a storm about to break. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then the shelter door exploded inward. Splinters rained across the floor as 3 armored wolves in human form surged inside, weapons raised. Elara stepped instinctively in front of the wolf. "Stop," she cried out, her voice sharp with fear and something deeper she did not understand. The wolves froze for a fraction of a second, startled by her audacity. The leader's eyes, golden and piercing, narrowed. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And why does the king's scent cling to your skin?" Elara's breath died in her throat. "King." They had said king. They had spoken the word out loud. And now every pair of eyes in the shelter shifted past her to the wolf behind her. The leader dropped to one knee instantly. "Your Majesty." The others followed. Elara's entire body went cold. The wolf behind her moved, his injured legs trembling, but his gaze stayed locked on her, as if she were the only soul in the room that mattered. And she knew, with terrifying clarity, that whatever happened next would shatter the life she had lived for 10 quiet years. The three wolves remained kneeling, their heads bowed low before the wounded black wolf behind Elara. But she could feel their confusion rippling through the cramped shelter like a second heartbeat. The leader's golden eyes lifted first, sharp and assessing as they flicked between her and their king. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "you are gravely injured. Allow us to carry you to safety." The black wolf answered with a deep growl that shook dust from the rafters. The sound was not directed at his soldiers. It was directed at them touching him. Or worse, at them touching her. Elara's pulse thundered. She glanced down at him, and his silver gaze locked onto hers, intense and unyielding. There was no mistaking the message there. "Stay. Do not move. You are mine to protect." Her breath caught. One of the kneeling guards dared a cautious step forward, but the king bared his teeth. In warning, struggling painfully to rise. Elara reacted without thinking. She dropped to her knees beside him, placing both hands gently on his fur. "Please," she whispered desperately. "Do not hurt yourself. You are already bleeding again. Let me help you." The moment her palms touched him, the faint golden heat trembled through her skin once more. The king's growl softened, his breathing steadied, and his massive frame eased down again with a shudder that felt almost like surrender. The soldiers stared in stunned silence. The leader's eyes widened as realization struck him like lightning. "Your Majesty, she is the one stabilizing you." Elara flinched. "I am not doing anything. I swear I do not know how any of this is happening." But the soldiers were already whispering among themselves. "His power is usually uncontrollable when wounded. He should be raging right now. He lets her touch him. He calms under her hands. It is impossible unless..." Elara stiffened. "Unless what?" The leader exchanged a heavy look with the others. "Unless he recognizes you." Elara's heart slammed into her ribs. "Recognizes me? From where? I have never seen him before tonight." But the king's eyes did not waver. They held her with a depth that made her stomach twist, as if he saw something in her that she had forgotten, as if he knew a truth she could not remember. Suddenly, the king shifted. Bones cracked, muscles twisted. Light flickered beneath his fur like burning silver fire. Elara gasped and stumbled back as the massive wolf collapsed forward, his form shimmering violently. The soldiers dropped their torches and scrambled, bowing even lower. "He is shifting," the leader whispered hoarsely. "But he is far too injured. He should not be able to." A surge of raw energy filled the shelter, pressing against Elara's skin like a rising tide. The sound of bones realigning echoed like thunder. Fur receded, limbs reshaped. Shadow and light wrapped around the transforming figure. Elara's heart stopped completely when the glow dimmed and the wolf was gone. In his place lay a man with hair as black as midnight, skin flushed with fever, and eyes that opened slowly, silver, piercing, unmistakably royal. His voice, when he spoke, was low and rough, scraping through the tense silence. Elara, her name, on his lips, as if he had spoken it 1,000 times before. Elara froze, her breath catching painfully. How do you know my name?" The Alpha King of Thornvale pushed himself unsteadily onto one elbow, grimacing against the pain, but his gaze stayed fixed on her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. "Because," he said, breath ragged, "I have been searching for you for 10 years. She staggered back until her shoulders hit the wall. "That is impossible. I have lived as a human all that time. I do not know you. I do not know any of this." His eyes darkened, not with anger, but with a deep, aching certainty. "You do not remember. They sealed you too well." The soldiers stared at him in shock. "Your Majesty, you mean she is..." He lifted a hand weakly, silencing them before their words finished forming. His gaze returned to Elara, softer now, almost broken. "You disappeared during the Black Moon War. They hid you in the human world. They erased your scent, your power, your name. But I knew you were alive." Elara shook her head violently, gripping her scarf as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The king's gaze dropped to the mark beneath it. "They may have erased everything else," he said quietly, "but they could not remove the bond." Her breath trembled. "Bond?" Silver fire flashed in his eyes. "You are not human, Elara Wen. You are my fated Omega." Her world cracked open, and nothing made sense anymore. Icy silence filled the cramped shelter as Elara stared at the Alpha King, her pulse thundering in her ears. His words wrapped around her like a net she could not escape, each one tightening until she could barely draw breath. You are my fated Omega. The claim echoed in her mind, impossible and undeniable all at once. She shook her head, backing away until her shoulders struck the wooden wall. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. I am human. I have always been human. I have no wolf. I have no pack. You are confusing me for someone else. But the king's silver eyes held a depth far older than confusion. Even injured, even half-conscious, his gaze locked onto her with unwavering certainty. You were never human, Elara, he said softly, as if coaxing her back from the edge of a precipice. They forced a human life on you, but your soul never belonged there. His guards exchanged uneasy looks, but none dared interrupt. The king lifted a hand, weak and shaking. Elara instinctively stepped back, but he did not reach for her. Slowly, painfully, he pointed to her scarf. Remove it, he murmured. Her chest tightened. No, Elara. His voice cracked like a quiet command, gentle but absolute. Let me see the mark. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the soft fabric around her throat. That mark had haunted her for as long as she could remember, a symbol she had hidden from everyone, including herself. She swallowed hard. I cannot, she whispered. I do not know what it means. The king's expression softened in a way that pierced straight through her fear. I do, he said, and you deserve to know it too. Slowly, painfully, he dragged himself upright, bracing his back against the wall. His guards moved to assist, but he growled low, stopping them instantly. His eyes never left hers. You remembered nothing of the night they took you, he said quietly. But I do. Elara felt the air shift, thickening as if the forest itself leaned in to listen. The king's breath shook as he continued. You were the last surviving Omega of the Celestine line, a bloodline older than any throne, a line blessed with a rare gift, a gift that could steady an alpha's rage, calm a beast, and heal wounds no healer could mend. Elara's stomach twisted. Celestine. That word tugged at a distant corner of her mind, like an echo of a dream she had long forgotten. You were mine, the king said softly. Chosen by the moon on the night we first met. The bond had only begun to form when the attack happened. His voice broke with barely contained fury. The traitors wanted you dead. They feared what you and I would become together. They feared the strength of a true alpha and his omega. They cast a spell that stripped your wolf, erased your scent, and sealed your power. By the time I reached you, you were gone. Elara felt the world tilt, the floor shifting beneath her feet. She pressed a hand to her mouth as memories flickered at the edge of her vision. Flashes of moonlight, the sound of distant howls, a warm hand pulling her into safety. A voice saying her name with fierce tenderness. Silver eyes watching her with wonder. She gasped, staggering, as a burst of pain ignited beneath her scarf. No, she whispered. No, this is not real. I cannot be her. I cannot be anyone other than who I have been. The king's voice dropped to a whisper that trembled through her bones. Then answer me this, Elara Wynn. Why does your touch heal me? Why does my wolf calm when you are near? Why did the bond flare the moment you laid your hands on me? She had no answer. The warmth that always pulsed through her palms, the strange connection she felt with him, the mark that burned like something waking, none of it made sense unless his words were true. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back fiercely. Even if what you say is true, she breathed, I cannot just accept it. I do not know how to be someone you claim I once was. His expression softened with a depth that made her chest ache. You do not have to remember who you were, he murmured, because you are still her. Elara's trembling fingers lifted toward her scarf, hesitating at her throat. The king's silver gaze held her firmly, reverently. Show me, he whispered. Let the truth breathe again. The mark beneath the fabric throbbed once more, hot and insistent, as if answering him. Beyond the thin walls of the shelter, the wind shifted, carrying the mournful sound of wolves bowing their heads to the reawakening of something sacred. Elara drew a shaking breath and slowly, finally, began to untie her scarf. Icy air clung to Elara's skin as her trembling fingers slowly loosened the knot of her scarf. The fabric fell away from her throat, and the moment the mark was exposed to the cool night air, the world seemed to hold its breath. A crescent-shaped symbol glowed faintly on her skin, pulsing with soft golden light like a heartbeat long suppressed. The guards inhaled sharply, immediately dropping back to their knees with their heads bowed. Even in human form, they felt the ancient power humming through the confined shelter. The Alpha King went utterly still, silver eyes widening as the mark flared brighter in response to his presence. His breath shuddered, almost breaking. "I knew it," he whispered, voice raw with emotion. "I knew you were still mine." Elara's hand flew to the glowing mark, her fingertips hovering just above the warmth, radiating through her skin. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Why is it doing that?" The king pushed himself upright with painstaking effort, ignoring the pain that tightened his jaw. His gaze locked onto her with reverence, fear, and overwhelming relief all tangled together. "Because the seal they placed on you is breaking," he said softly. "The bond remembers what your mind does not." His words made her knees weaken, and she sank to the floor as a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. Images flickered at the edge of her vision. Moonlit halls, a courtyard filled with silver banners, a young alpha with eyes like liquid metal reaching out his hand to her. The memories vanished before she could grasp them, leaving her breathless. "I cannot remember," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "I want to, but I cannot." The king reached out slowly, with the cautious trembling of a man touching a miracle he feared might disappear. His fingers brushed the side of her face, and the moment his skin touched hers, a surge of heat flowed through her chest. She gasped, her entire body trembling as the bond between them flared to life, ancient and undeniable. "You will remember," he murmured. "Not because I tell you to, but because your soul already has." Elara's lips parted in a trembling breath as he lifted his hand to her neck, his thumb tracing the glowing mark. Her pulse raced wildly beneath his touch, but instead of fear, a deep, echoing recognition unfurled inside her. Like a door unlocking, like a voice calling her name across 10 silent years. "Kael," she whispered, the name slipping from her mouth before she realized she knew it. The room froze. The king inhaled sharply, his eyes burning with stunned hope. "Say it again." "Kael," she whispered, stronger this time, her voice shaking with the weight of returning memory. His expression crumpled, raw relief flashing across his face. Then he leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently to hers. The bond roared to life beneath her skin, the mark blazing in response, filling the shelter with soft golden light. The guards bowed their heads deeper, recognizing the sacred moment. Kael's voice dropped to a low, reverent whisper. "Elara win, my omega, my mate, my long-lost heart, by moonlight and blood, I claim you once more." His lips brushed her, marked with a tender, electric touch. Elara cried out softly, not in pain but in overwhelming awakening, as the final piece of the seal shattered inside her. Heat spread through her veins like a golden sunrise. Her senses sharpened. Her heartbeat steadied into something deeper, older, wolf-born. She felt everything, his warmth, his breath, his certainty, his unbroken devotion. And she knew with clarity that terrified and soothed her in equal measure. She had been running from a life she had forgotten, but she had run straight back into the arms of the one fate had chosen for her. Kael pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "You lived as a human for 10 years, he murmured. "But you were never meant to stay hidden." His hand cupped her cheek, gentle and fierce all at once. "Come home with me." Elara's breath trembled, but for the first time since the night began, she did not feel lost. She felt found. She placed her hand over his, her mark still glowing between them. "I will." Outside, the wolves howled as one, the cry rising into the night in a chorus of devotion and triumph. The king had found his omega, and Elara Wynn, who once lived as a human, stepped back into her destiny as the true mate of the Alpha King.